My grandma, who I call Hama, would always tell me and my brothers when getting a toy from a capsule machine, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. She knew the machines were random in the distribution and tried to set us up to make sure we weren't disappointed when we didn't get exactly what we wanted. My brothers and I would typically try to find joy in whatever we got, even if it wasn't what we were hoping for. And we would do this by, not using the toy in a typical conventional way. Today, I carry that sentiment to video it. I get footage handed to me, and I have to make whatever the artist, whether it's myself or a collaborator, I have to fit that footage to their intention. I get what I get, and there's no going back and grabbing a shot that whoever missed. I have to use what I have and whatever tools and ways that I have in my arsenal. This has always worked. I figured out I always find a way to make the piece work, even if that means we're moving the goal a little bit. But what if I could go back and get what I wanted? This would be ideal, right? Well, maybe not. I plan on releasing an interview video. This video right now, before MagFest, but I was not happy with the footage that I had. So I decided I'll delay beyond MagFest and I'll reshoot. Then I reshot it again. And then I reshot it again and again. Each time there was another issue that I wasn't happy with. So what was my plan to release this video? How do I stop this cycle of reshooting? The advice from Hama ran through my head. Get what you get and you don't throw a fit. And I knew that's exactly what I had to do. So before I keep on rambling, why don't I introduce myself and let you know about my video editing experience?
Yeah, well, my name is Peter Gillette. I'm a filmmaker and I've been working professionally for over 7 years. And I've worked for a number of VGM folks, from Insane in the Rain, Don Palambi. I've collaborated with Ropain Gantu many times, and dozens of others. But I've also worked in the film industry, such as Princeton University, Patreon. I worked on some videos for them. I worked at a color grading post house called Olio, just to name a few.
What was my goal with this video? Well, I wanted to talk about editing, but I wanted to do it in a more casual interview way, mainly because I wanted to get the video out quicker. So I figured, why not just interview myself? I could do some fun editing tricks, and in the process I can show what I'm telling in a relatively easy manner. Well, the issue was I wasn't achieving that second half. I wasn't showing what I was telling. So what makes a good edit? What's the process of doing that?
Yeah, so my process, when you really break it down, it's getting the footage, it's organizing everything, putting it into the timeline, making motivated cuts so that I keep with the energy of the project. Typically, I color grade if they ask for it, render, and then from there do revision edits. When I say the energy of the project or the feeling, it's kind of difficult to exactly pinpoint certain things. What I do is I try to emulate exactly what the artist's intentions are. I try to make sure that I keep everything in the same way. So if it's a faster piece, I'll cut quicker. If it's slower, it'll be a slower edit. But it really just goes down to the message, because ultimately, this is a medium for communication. You're communicating your ideas, your thoughts, your passions to someone else. Of course, you could say a sentence that is all jumbled up and mismatched, and they might get the same idea. So you want to cut out any distracting language when you're speaking in person. So in editing, you want to do the same thing.
I want to exaggerate something that I just said. This is a means of communication. To get the job done, you need to effectively and concisely convey the message, using all tools available to you. I wasn't doing that. This is a video about editing, and it goes in depth about what you want to think about when you are editing. But I wasn't using the necessary film tools, such as...
I try to adhere certain film rules. One of the ones that I always keep in the back of my brain is something called the Kuleshov effect. And what that is this idea of when you have one image stitched together with another image after it, that sequence changes the audience's understanding. I keep that in mind because that's what makes this medium special, is the sequence of images shown one after the other after the other. Another thing that I keep in mind, just to make sure the audience isn't distracted, is the 180-degree rule. There's this imaginary line when you're cutting between multiple different cameras. And what you want to do is make sure that you don't cross that line. Or basically, if one person's looking one way in one shot, you don't want them looking the opposite way in the next. That's just confusing unless that's something that you want.
So this is a single shot with occasional cut-ins and zooms, but it all done from a single camera angle. There are no angles to misalign the 180-degree rule, and there's no other images to cut to explain the Kuleshov effect. Don't get me wrong, these are very important tools and necessary to keep in mind when editing, but I wasn't conveying that in my own edit. So here's why I'm doing this voiceover, and why I'm using what I got and not throwing a fit about it. What I thought was all the parts of the puzzle, the interview, turned out to actually be pieces to a larger puzzle that I needed to solve in a completely different way.
All contributes to that energy. Again, you want to keep everything as concise and to the point as possible, while also elaborating where you need.
So this is all great, but is all of this just an elaborate way of saying you need to make sense of how everything fits together and make sure it securely fits? Well, yeah, that's exactly what editing is. There is no locked-in rules. You need to listen and hear what you are trying to say and convey that as concisely as possible to the audience. You wear two hats when you're editing. You're the person giving out the message, but you're also the audience, and you need to make sure that nothing is lost in that process. Now, there are a few things that you can keep in mind while editing that are concrete, that come from shared experiences.
Understand frame rate and what it does, not just in camera, but how it affects the timeline.
I really think the best way to understand frame rate is to know how it's used in media. So, for example, film is shot in 24, typically. TV is also typically 30 frames per second, and most sports are shot in 60 frames per second. Understand that people come from their understanding of how they've experienced that frame rate before. They're subconsciously bringing what they saw and connecting it to your piece. And that's something that you can take advantage of, something that you should know and understand when applying whatever you're doing. Now, there is also a couple of things that we could go into about frame rate, such as slow motion and mixed frame rate. But that's a topic for another video, and for now I'd recommend either looking it up online or just doing some math, and you can kind of figure out how all of that works out.
Do your best to understand codec. Oftentimes you see H.264, H.265, ProRes, Blackmagic RAW, Canon RAW, all of these different things. And that's how the camera shot the image, put it together into a file, into a nice box, and then how a computer interprets it and how you play around with it. And the reason why this is important is because that could potentially cause issues, especially when you're color grading. If You're editing an H.264 image and you're going to have your image kind of fall apart. But you can only really mitigate it if you know what's causing that problem. 4-bit color depth to the color resolution. This tells you how far you could stretch the image, how you could shift one color to a completely different one, and make sure that things don't fall apart and compress, kind of like almost like when you see that one Facebook post that's been shared and shared and shared and shared and shared again, you get all of the weird blockiness around it. You could do that straight in your edit if you're not careful.
It's important to know what you could do with what you have. Going beyond what you could do with your image can come with a massive issue. Look up what your codec is and see how far you can push it in your color grade. It's good to know. And typically I would leave this part out of the video, but codecs and all sorts of different very exciting things are coming out on cameras that are significantly cheaper and more accessible. So look it up and see what you can do. Might as well take advantage of what you can, right? Also, a quick note, please back up your footage. It's super important. You don't want to give yourself a headache down the road. And yeah, just make sure you back up your footage and your timeline. Once is nice, twice is even better. Just make sure that you have a good backup. Now, what is something to keep in mind when you're first starting out on video editing?
Most important thing is just to start. Work on whatever you have. If you have a computer from the last 10 years, and as long as it's not, a super basic Chromebook or something, you could start editing. I would say start doing whatever you can on whatever piece of software and just go to town. You don't get better unless you start. I've been editing or working professionally for 7 years, but before that I was editing for even more. You have to start somewhere, and it's great to just start learning. Grab clips online, stock footage, start filming on your phone. It might not be film quality, but you don't have to start editing film quality. Just start with something. Never stop learning. There's always something new to learn. I'm actively learning new stuff every day, whether it's new equipment that's coming out, new codecs, new software, new plugins, or even watching a film and understanding why I liked it so much, what worked, why did they do certain edits, what motivated an edit. All of that's super important.
Keep on learning is so important. There's hidden knowledge hiding in the most unexpected places. Hell, I learned an old lesson when making this video. You get what you get and you don't throw a fit. So, either way, that's my piece on editing. I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Behind the Screens, and I hope to see you all in the next, most likely completely different Behind the Screens video. I hope you all have a great day.